Good morning. Something that I learned very well because I needed to when I was in China and Sweden was the fact that different perspectives aren't always wrong. They're simply different. I came from Calgary, Alberta, Canada, where I think it's fair to say that my understanding of the world was quite small. And when I went to Sweden, I went through a number of transitions in my understanding of another person's perspective, and then this changed me forever, and then it was compounded in China. The first experience that I had was, hey, these people are kind of like us, and so I noticed similarities. And that's natural. We're social creatures, and we typically notice similarities first with others. And then I went through a transition where I went, wait a second, these people do a lot of things differently than what I grew up doing. And my first understanding, my first belief, my first perspective was, why do they do it wrong? Why don't they do it right like we do it? At the time, this was in 1990, I would say probably 1997. I saw people having like a bunch of containers underneath their sinks of like recycling and other things. I thought, what a waste. Why don't you just take it to the dump and get rid of it all? Uh, I'm embarrassed to say this, but there were many perspectives like this. The way people maybe connected with their kids or disciplined their kids or people or interacted with other people. And I thought, these people are doing a bunch of things wrong. Well, eventually I came to a place where I went, hold on. These people do things differently than me, but often they're far better than what I've learned growing up. And that perspective where I went from me believing that I was right to seeing someone else's perspective and saying, wait a second, there's another way, and it might be better than my way or the way that I learned growing up, was phenomenal for me. As soon as I started to see other people's perspective, I was able to connect with them and understand them better. And actually, when I came back, there's a really famous quote that I've heard often said, and that is that when you learn a second language, you gain a second soul. You become a different person. There's a difference in you. And when I came back to Canada, and ever since when I've come back to Canada, there's always this little aspect where I don't fully fit in because my perspective is different than maybe the average person who's only stayed in a small spot. I actually get along really well with people who have lived overseas or speak other languages. Now, after that, I went to China, and it was fascinating. You go to a different country, and it's almost like you're a child again. I was going when I was 22 or 23 years old, and yet I didn't know how to do anything. I didn't know how to make a phone call. I didn't know how to purchase a simple thing at a store. I didn't know anything. And so I was forced to learn another's perspective, and that was, again, very healthy for me. Now, why am I telling you this? Why is perspective important? It's because when it comes back down to real estate, when it comes back down to business, when it comes back down to relationships with others around us, if we don't see another's perspective, often we find ourselves arguing about something that isn't really even something to argue about. I'll give you an example. If a seller of a property says, hey, listen, I need this in the property. For example, I need this purchase price. And the buyer is saying, well, I need a discount. People can argue with each other and say, well, I need this, well, I need this, I need this, and I need this. Yeah, I'm sure you've heard of this. Maybe arguing with your kids or your spouse or your friends or someone around you. Often we're arguing about something and it's not going anywhere. It's just ramming heads together. Now, if you can see somebody else's perspective and you can ask a few questions, well, why do you want the price that you have? And all of a sudden you learn a little bit more from their perspective. And you learn that this was a family property and that the father had always promised the kids a certain thing. And so if they don't get a certain price, then they think they're doing wrong by their father. They believe their father's letting them down or something. As soon as you understand more of the story and you understand somebody else's perspective, you might be able to find a solution. For example, all of a sudden you could say, hey, well, have you ever heard of an agreement for sale? Where I will pay you what you want, but we now have to push it over a couple of years and allow me to optimize the building a little bit and allow me to do this. Well, all of a sudden you can find something that works. Because so often what we're arguing is one person is yelling, the sky is blue, and the other person is yelling, the grass is green, and then they're both right in their own way. What we need to do is bridge that gap and have us communicate about the right thing, about the thing that matters to each of us. I want you to practice this. And the way you practice perspective and understanding somebody else's perspective is simply asking more questions. When they say, this is what I need, say, help me understand that. Help me understand. This will help with real estate. It'll help with negotiation. It will help with business. It will help with sales. It will help with negotiations in partnerships. But it will also help in relationships. Instead of you and your partner arguing with each other, you can reconcile and say, well, what is important to you about this, and what is important to me? How do we meet our needs, and maybe bend a little bit on the things that are not needs? This makes a difference to every type of relationship that you will ever have in your life if you learn to see somebody else's perspective. I call it negotiation 101. I call it communication 101, or sales 101, or influence 101. It's about understanding somebody else's perspective. Think about this for a second. When you feel understood, when you feel like your needs are being met, are you willing to bend and help somebody else in some ways? My guess is that you're probably saying yes. Unless, I'm not even going to go there, okay? Most normal people will say, of course. If I have my most important needs met, I'm willing to bend on some other things. I hope this is helpful for you. If it is, let me know. Feel free to email me back at any time. If you're watching this on YouTube, feel free to write a comment, and I'm happy to engage with you. If you need any other help with this or have other questions, feel free to reach out to me. But I want to finish off with something that I said last week, and I'm going to get into this habit again. And that is to finish off the videos with a statement that I fully believe. You've got this.